Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Grandmaster Knockout. In the left corner, the one, the only, Carlsen. And his opponent, ladies and gentlemen, Keymer. Tonight, one board, 64 squares playing white, Carlsen playing black, Keymer. Gentlemen, let the battle begin. Carlsen, pawn to b3. Keymer, pawn to d5. Carlsen, bishop to b2. Keymer, knight to f6. Carlsen, knight to f3. Keymer, pawn to c5. Carlsen, pawn to e3. Keymer, pawn to g6. Carlsen, pawn to c4. Keymer, bishop to g7. Carlsen, pawn takes d5. Keymer, queen takes d5. Carlsen, knight to c3. Keymer, queen to f5. Carlsen, knight to b5. Keymer, knight to a6. Carlsen, bishop to e2. Keymer, castles kingside. Carlsen, castles kingside. Keymer, pawn to b6. Carlsen, pawn to a3. Keymer, bishop to b7. Carlsen, queen to b1. Keymer, queen takes b1. Carlsen, rook takes b1. Keymer, rook to fc8. Carlsen, pawn to b4. Keymer, knight to c7. Carlsen, knight takes c7. Keymer, rook takes c7. Carlsen, bishop to e5. Keymer, rook to cc8. Carlsen, king to f1. Keymer, knight to e4. Carlsen, bishop takes g7. Keymer, king takes g7. Carlsen, king to e1. Keymer, knight to d6. Carlsen, pawn to a4. Keymer, pawn to c4. Carlsen, rook to c1. Keymer, rook to c7. Carlsen, pawn to g3. Keymer, rook to ac8. Carlsen, knight to d4. Keymer, pawn to a6. Carlsen, pawn to f4. Keymer, pawn to h5. Carlsen, rook to c3. Keymer, knight to e4. Carlsen, rook to c2. Keymer, knight to d6. Carlsen, pawn to b5. Keymer, pawn to a5. Carlsen, rook to ac1. Keymer, rook to c5. Carlsen, bishop to f3. Keymer, bishop takes f3. Carlsen, knight takes f3. Keymer, pawn to c3. Carlsen, pawn to d3. Keymer, pawn to f6. Carlsen, knight to d4. Keymer, king to f7. Carlsen, knight to c6. Keymer, pawn to h4. Carlsen, pawn to g4. Keymer, pawn to g5. Carlsen, rook takes c3. Keymer, rook takes c3. Carlsen, rook takes c3. Keymer, pawn takes f4. Carlsen, pawn takes f4. Keymer, pawn to h3. Carlsen, king to f2. Keymer, rook to g8. Carlsen, king to f3. Keymer, knight to b7. Carlsen, knight takes a7. Keymer, knight to c5. Carlsen, knight takes g8. Carlsen lands the knockout. Keymer has no answer. If you loved this fight, smash that like button and subscribe. More legendary battles are coming your way. See you in the next one.